guys, what is up? It's right here, and today I have for you the usual monthly tier list for Vanguard 0. Yay, everyone's favorite. I specifically waited until after the day 2 for the spring CS to end first, just to make sure what my thoughts were more or less right, and turns out they were. So without further ado, I guess we'll start now. 3 tiers, back to 3 tiers. Last time it was 4, since back to 3. S is the really good decks, A are the good decks, and B are the playable decks. Take that however you want. That's just how I look at it. Like the tier gaps is like there is a distinct difference in power level between decks here and decks here and decks here to decks here. That's just how I look at it. So we will start. So I think I'll start with, we'll go from the bottom up like usual. These two. Let's see, anything else? I'm actually not too sure about this, but I'll put this here for now. And honestly, this too. Alright, so I think these decks are all here. Link Joker just, even with golds being less popular and unlocks being not everywhere, I still think these decks are still struggling right now. They're very much playable and they can definitely steal wins and stuff, but I think the old meta stuff like Liberators and Shadow and Conquer stuff still kind of take a dump on you, and against the Legion decks they just start healing too many times, or at least the good one. Spoilers, the good one being Seekers. They just outgrind you forever, and you just kind of lose to them, even after you lock their stuff and can't play for a turn or two. Yeah, I think these decks are still fine. Chaos a little more so than Glendios, but yeah, I think these decks are starting to fall off a bit. So just wait for them to get Legion stuff before they're good again. But they're playable, but not amazing. I'm only putting Angel Feather here because you never see this deck on ladder, and when you do, they don't do much of anything. I don't have the deck myself, so I couldn't test it. So, but from what I've seen and from what the deck does, not that impressive. I don't think this deck is anywhere higher than this. And in Great Nature, a deck that I have tested, right into a few times, this deck just doesn't do anything. It doesn't do enough. Yeah, you get consistent 4 attacks, but that's like what, like 2 damage or 2, like it just doesn't do enough. That's another thing. It doesn't do enough. Like, yeah, you're drawing a bunch of cards, but if you're not drawing to your PGs or intercepts, do you really care what you're drawing into? PGs more though. Intercepts, you usually have enough with your hand. You usually have enough anyways. But like, the thing is, if you're not drawing to PGs, you really don't care that you're drawing a bunch of cards with this deck. So yeah. These 2 decks just can't keep up in my opinion right now, and these 2 decks just don't do enough for being a Legion deck. Actually, no, this deck probably goes here too. This is a case of 2 things. One, the deck is good enough. The deck is good. I think the deck is still pretty good, but you still have really bad matchups in these 2 decks, and this deck is just completely outclassed by Seekers, the other Royal Paladin. So I think this does go here. Yeah. And then next up, the B tier. This deck definitely goes here. This deck definitely goes here. Wow. Spoilers, right? I'll order this after. I will order all this after. Wow, very big tier. So I guess since there's no spoilers anymore, I'll put these here as well. But wow. Look at Liberators falling from grace. Just look at it. The deck is going further and further down. Heck, I think even Ezel is better than the deck at this point. Yeah, something like this. Yeah, everything past like Sook is kind of rearrangeable in my opinion. Let's go from the end. Overlord. It is on as much as I love Overlord and would love for this deck to be better than the deck that has the Novell stuff in it. This deck just isn't as good because this deck's game plan is literally ride Breakguard Overlord, eat shit to the face, go to 4, try to check a bunch of times, and hope you flip enough heals to make a comeback on the turn, and grind the game out after that. It just isn't. Your game plan just kind of isn't amazing in this deck. You don't really have that much pressure either, and since you have to play the Breakout Overlord, you can't play as many copies of the original Overlord, so you don't even have that much kill pressure. You don't have that much kill pressure unless you draw into that 1-0. So yeah, definitely probably the weakest deck in this tier, and definitely the weaker of the two Kagero variants. Next to Spikes, I still think this deck is good. Probably the best generate 3 to 6 deck, 3 to 6 Break Red deck. You don't see it ever, but that's a combination of it being a clan event and super expensive at the same time, and there's just more fun things to play now. So yeah, Revengers. It's worse Liberators, and Liberators are already kind of not very good right now. So yeah, it's a perfectly playable deck, but the Legion decks are, for the most part, better than it. It just doesn't do enough. It's a really strong and solid deck, but it just doesn't do enough to make it better than any decks in front of it. Next up is Liberators. So this one I do want to talk a bit more about, other than just, oh, it's not good, or oh, it does X thing really well and X thing not very well. But after getting Wingal nerfed, the deck definitely, it doesn't seem like it would be a lot, but after getting Wingal nerfed, the one counter blast can matter late in the game sometimes, but that's usually not the point. The biggest thing about this deck now is that your turn 2 just isn't nearly as good as it used to be because it costs counter blast. Because a lot of times, your turn 2, a lot of the times, if you want second, the Wingal costing counter blast means you can't use the Wingal to search a blast blade to ride on your grade 2 turn, meaning the blast blade Barkle behind it Vanguard play is not as consistent as it used to be. And if you wrote something like Escride, you have to choose between which card you want to use the counter blast for, instead of before where you could just use Escride and use Wingal. So it definitely did hurt a lot. Your turn 2 definitely hurt a lot, and in my opinion, the turn 2 was honestly what made the deck so good to begin with, because you just got a bunch of free cards at grade 2 while being able to rush the opponent for basically free most of the time. So yeah, definitely not nearly as good as it used to be. Last month it was here, but last month you also didn't have like 4 of these decks here. So yeah, that are in front of it. So yeah, combination of nerfs plus other deck just being better than it is what makes me want to put this deck under it. Honestly, Ezel probably is still worse than this deck. Ezel, you shit out intercepts, your Vanguard gets really big, that's about it. Still good, actually no. Yeah, it's still a solid deck. I think it's relatively interchangeable if you really care, but yeah, Ezel does Ezel things, and Ezel does Ezel things well. There's nothing else to say about it. The deck is a little high rolly because a lot of your game plan is highly dependent on can you flip a Saphir off the top, because you truly will notice the differences between the games where you can find Saphir off the top with Scissors and with the games where you can't, because the game that unflip is really, really good. It lets you use Ezel more to like damage deny the opponent and stuff like that, and more counter blocks is always nice. So yeah, strong deck, a good deck. It just does good things, but it's a little high rolly in its game plan, because a lot of it does bank on checking the right card off the top or when you use it. So yeah, Sook. I had this deck lower last time, but the championships has truly shown me that Sook is eternal and will never die. And the deck that, as long as the deck doesn't like brick on its ride chain completely, it can still do really, really good things. Honestly, Riders are probably below Sook. Oh, no, not like that, not like that. Actually, nah. I still think the fact that the deck can brick does make it a. Honestly speaking, if really just at tournaments, then like this deck is probably better than like these two decks. Honestly speaking, but yeah, but like if we're considering everything in consideration, you never see this deck on ladder. It takes too long on ladder to play this deck, but it's still good. I guess I will move it up here like this, but yeah, as long as you don't brick on your ride chain and like soul charge all your heals and PG and stuff like that, this deck is very, very good. So yeah, still good, still does what it needs to do. Tom is still really, really powerful. It does get out. It does get like the really good decks can still beat it, because you get like outgrinded and stuff we get outpaced by the other decks. So I really don't know where to put this. Like, Suki is really good when it gets to pop off, but when you don't get to pop off, it just kind of isn't very good. Or rather, when you brick your Raichu, that just falls flat on its face. So, take this as a wheel. It, like, honestly speaking, most of the stuff is very interchangeable with placement. So I'll just leave this here, I guess. Next up, Risers. Your game plan is you crit them to 5, and then you with the Mega Flare, and then you ride the other Legion, and you chip 3 PGs. This deck doesn't really. It's okay. It's a very baseline okay kind of deck. Nothing amazing. It's cool, I guess. It's okay. Like, the game plan is, like I said before, you crit them to 5, and then you try to triple check them. But that is also assuming they're playing new PGs to actually go to 5. But stable game plan, the deck just does okay things. The dual flip is also really good, but the timing on the card's kind of awkward. But that is a discussion for its own time. This deck is just it's a solid okay deck. That's about it. All much I can say. Next up we have Brawlers. So Brawlers did have representation in the Spring CS. I think he got second. The guy who got second played this deck, but there was a massive sacking involved in that. So I kind of don't take massive sack for the player into consideration of how good the deck is. But this deck is good. Like, I don't think it's amazing or anything, but I definitely think the deck is still like a good and playable deck. Being Vermilion but with scaling rear, so you don't have to worry about defensives as much or basically at all, is really nice. And very scary, because if you use this card or you use the shotgun blow to push them to 5 or 4, and then they don't heal, no harm to PGs, this card just kind of kills them. But the biggest problem in this deck is that it still has Narukami problems of not being able to draw PGs, not being able to draw intercepts, flooded with grade 3s in hand, can't do anything with them. It still has its Narukami problems, which is why I think it's still a relatively high roll-y-ish deck that doesn't belong in tier 1. It's still really high up here, but I don't think it's anywhere close to being like the best of the best deck kind of thing. Next up, Genesis. I do rate this deck very highly, actually. I do think this deck is very good. Lower ceiling than something like Brawlers, but this deck has like the tools it needs to play a grind game and have a really good and have multiple good win cons actually, because you can play Yggdrasil, which is a glory for the deck. You still have your Chamomiles to do multi attacks, and then if you need more attacks, you also have you can still play Minerva in the deck to do extra attacks with the Vanguard too. So very this is just a deck that just has basically everything in it. So it's just very solid. You have a glory, you have a restanding Vanguard, you have technically restanding rears, but those are more recalled rears more than anything. You have back row retire with the Hesperius, and you have even more ways to get stuff from your soul now with the new cards that put the Regalia cards from drop to soul. So yeah, I think this deck just got a little bit of everything. That's why I think it's up here. Next up, final deck in this tier, it would be Kagero. So this is like the Novell, Dauntless, whatever you want to put in this deck kind of thing. Any deck that has Novell in it, anything that basically isn't pure Overlord that has Novell in it is this deck. Novell is still the no fun time, or the no fun card, because it shuts down triggers. Kagero is still Kagero. There really isn't much to say about this, to be honest. It's always been like in the top tier or like the top of this tier forever. So yeah, and then there really isn't much to say about this deck, honestly. It's been on Global for like what, 2 months now, so even Global players know what this deck does. JP, we got like a few new toys in Burnout, but yeah. Good deck, solid deck, but definitely isn't as good as the decks on top. So yeah, so this is it for the A tier. So I did say that I'd say the placement past like I say like this batch is interchangeable and this batch is interchangeable, but I don't think there's a big enough of a difference between like this batch of decks and this batch of decks to warrant a whole new tier or anything like that. So yeah. So yeah, this is the A tier, definitely the biggest tier here, but what can you do? There's like a lot of, the set definitely gave a lot of like really good playable decks in for once, instead of having like 1 or 2 good decks and the rest of everything was being trash. Like you can see like everything, most of the Legion decks are at least good. So yeah. But finally with the S tier, I do think Silver Thoughts are the best deck now because, the deck, for one, didn't get nerfed because lol people whined about the nerfs being too harsh, which, sure, I guess. But this deck is good because this deck the deck's win con isn't gated behind anything, and it can technically start doing its win con on turn 2 because Marichika doesn't check for anything. It just on hit get to call something from Soul, which is really good. So like you just get to do multi attacks to scale starting from turn 2. It doesn't check for a limit break. It doesn't need you to. It doesn't have like a turn count. It doesn't have specific Vanguard needed to do anything. So yeah, it just starts hitting your face in, and because the deck just soul charges a bunch and like relatively selective soul charge too, you do have like a higher trigger rate than the average deck, aside from the Legion deck. The Legion decks just put triggers back into the deck. So yeah, it's just that like this deck is a deck that isn't locked behind any mechanics, so it just starts doing things. It starts hitting you really hard, like starting from turn 2, which is really good. And in the cases where you don't hit all your dodge triggers, you just ride like Venus and start bombing a board out of your soul. Wow, easy board. What a good card. What a fair deck. Definitely not need to get nerfed. Yeah, so yeah. I really do think it's the best deck right now. It also showed in the championships. This was one of the most played decks, if I remember correctly. I think the specific statistics was like 11 out of 16 people brought this deck, and this was the deck that was by far the most banned. So yeah, just shows how scary this deck is, how good this deck is. Yeah. Next up, the other, in my opinion, tier 1 deck, or S tier deck, or whatever you want to call this tier, is Seekers. Or honestly, it's not even Seekers. It's just Gancelon. This deck is just Gancelon. And this deck, it can like wall up with the Wingal. It has a pretty okay finisher and Thing Saver. You have like 8 retires in the deck with the 2 different blaster blades. But at the end of the day, this deck is just carried by Gancelot, and this deck just happens to be a deck that can abuse Gancelot really well because, oh, you triggered dead Gancelots? Oh, just Legion them back. Oh, you have dead Gancelots ahead? Oh, that's fine. Just Legion Blaster Blades and put that Gancelot back in. And this deck is just this deck is the definition of a deck that's just it's really good at abusing Gancelot. That's all this deck does. It abuses Gancelot really well. So yeah, that's why it's here. And the Spring CS also did show. Everyone brought this deck as one of their decks. I played it in top 16. Unfortunately, I lost round 1. That's the point here. I brought this deck too. This deck, everyone else brought it too. So I think the rep rate kind of shows that this deck is a very good deck. In fact, 16 out of 16 people brought it. And whenever you did see it, or when you did get to see this deck play in the Spring CS, all you saw were Gancelots flying everywhere. So yeah. Not much else to say. This is literally just Gancelot the deck. It just happens to abuse Gancelot the best out of any Rogue Paladin deck. So yeah. So this is more or less my thoughts on this one's meta. Yeah. Not much else to say. Honestly, you could probably remove like this and Glendios, speaking from the tier list. But yeah, these are my thoughts. Like and subscribe, all the good stuff. Tell me guys what you think about my list in the comments. Anything that you would change, or just anything in general. Like and subscribe again, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.